Welcome, everyone. Welcome to The Matter of the Heart. I am your host, Carol Olivia, and we're always so glad that you take the time out to listen to The Matter of the Heart. I wonder if any of you ever think of your dreams when you wake up. Was there any significance? Were there any symbols? Was there any recurring symbols over a time period that you just didn't understand? Did you ever see people that you never saw before? What is synchronicity or meaningful coincidences? And who is Carl Jung? What's the unconscious mind? And how does that affect our daily routines? Does it dominate our daily routines? Or does our conscious mind dominate our daily routines? Well, we have Joshua Schmude on the phone and on the show, and he is the author of Reverse Speech in Theory and Practice: How to Use Your Unconscious Mind to Predict the Outcome of Future Events. He's also the founder of Lionheart Publishing. And so we welcome you, Joshua. We welcome you to the show.
Hello, Carol. Thank you for having me.
What's the unconscious mind, Joshua?
Well, it depends on the viewpoint that you take with it. But from a Jungian perspective and really from a reverse speech perspective, but from a Jungian perspective, he believed that there was 3 layers to the unconscious mind, or to our psyches. And the first layer was conscious, our everyday waking state. The second layer was the personal unconscious, or the part of ourselves that was once conscious but has become unconscious due to the passage of time. So memories are a perfect example of things you will encounter in that level of the psyche and the personal unconscious. The collective unconscious is more of a reservoir of our collective history. So it deals with mythological motifs. It uses images and symbols that we might not consciously be aware of the meaning off the bat, but they actually do have a significance in our history and our past. The symbols that are being presented mean something. And so this is what Jung called the collective unconscious. It's really tapping into a sort of consciousness that's outside of your own personal conscious experience. It's more of a collective nature. And with David Oates, his theories regarding reverse speech, he believes much the same way. So he structured a lot of his theories based, for the most part, on Jung's idea of the unconscious. Jung got that idea from a dream that he had. And I don't know, I can't remember the particular details, but I remember the overall context. And he had started in a room in a house which looked modern, like his room, I believe he said. And then he went down the stairs and he encountered more of like a medieval Renaissance looking room. And then he went to a deeper level and I believe he said he saw skulls and it was more prehistoric. And so this is how he developed his levels of consciousness, or levels of the psyche, was from this dream. But David Oates believes much the same way with reversals.
Fascinating. So are we, when we speak, are you saying that we're not totally conscious of the depth of the words spoken?
We're not fully conscious, not only of the depth, but I guess we would say the depth and the tone of the words spoken. So just to give the listeners some context on what reverse speech is, because you might not know what it is or have never heard of it. It really started before David Oates, back in the late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s. Pastors from all around the United States were playing records backwards. And like Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven, and they were getting these messages in reverse that were like, they were satanic and from demons. Well, David Oates was working at a halfway house at the time, and some kids had stormed into his office and started quoting these sermons about the demons in these records if you played them backwards. And David was upset, and he wanted to test what they were saying and put their fears to rest. And he, discovered it wasn't just in music, but it was actually in everyday human communication. So anybody who is speaking verbally forwards in any language will also generate simultaneously, while they're speaking forwards, messages in reverse, which come from the unconscious mind. And these messages occur when forward speech is played backwards through any sound software. You can play it backwards, and about every 15 to 30 seconds, there's going to be messages in these amongst the gibberish, let's say, and these messages will relay thoughts that may be going on in the mind of the speaker when they're speaking. At a deeper level, they could relay the sources and the operations of human behavior. So that's where we get into the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious, getting reversals that are really dealing with the root sources and causes of the way we act the way we do.
So with this, should we be looking at communication any differently?
Well, essentially, his theory is a linguistic theory, but it's been labeled a pseudoscience by
Right.
certain members of the academic community. There's other members that have tested these theories, or a part of the Reverse Speech Association, and they agree with David's findings, which I don't believe David. I've been using this for 10 years. I'm beyond believing. He put forth theories and basically said, test these theories yourself and come to your own conclusions. He didn't force them down my throat and say, it's not like a cult, where this guy's preaching about having faith in something or his interpretation of a Bible verse.
Right.
This is definitely more scientific. He put forth 3 fundamental theories, and it's using these 3 theories that anyone can get information with their speech reversals. So that's kind of sums it up in a nutshell.
So get information, you mean the depth of the words? What do you mean by information?
Right. Well, the reversals are not formed by the actual word itself. So, for
Right.
example, me and you could be talking and saying the exact same things forwards and get totally different messages in reverse. And
Right.
the reason that's possible is because these messages are not formed by the actual word themselves, but by the tone that you use when you say it. So by the emotion in the word.
That's interesting. So when you say the tone, you're saying the inflection of the emotion that's coming out.
Yes, precisely. Yes. So somebody who has an angrier tone,
Right.
Screaming and they
Right.
will get similar reversals. And that's not just the tone, but that's the theory of complementarity. So one of David's fundamental theories with reverse speech is the theory of complementarity. So basically, there's 2 separate modes of speech. One is spoken forwards and is conscious. The
Right.
other is spoken in reverse and is unconscious. The 2 modes of speech are simultaneous, and they actually complement and are dependent on each other. So what he means by that is whatever you talk about forwards,
Right.
you're going to get backward messages about. So if we talk about our day forwards, then you're going to get messages about how your day went, your thoughts during the day, feelings, things like that. If you're talking about behavior or something of a deeper level, God or spirituality, then you will get reversals of that nature, because that's what you're talking about forward. So it gives the analyst a definite way to structure a conversation in such a way that you generate certain types of backward messages.
Hmm. And in your title, the title of your book, Joshua, How to Use Your Subconscious to Predict the Outcome of Future Events.
Yes.
Are you relating to dream? What are you relating to with that?
Both. In the first chapter, I get into dreams and kind of a brief bird's eye view of history of dreams and the importance that different cultures have placed on dreams as a means of communication with the divine. So there's, in the Old Testament, there's the book of Numbers. I believe it's the book of Numbers where he says, I know it's in Job as well, but in Numbers, in a dream and a vision by night, when deep sleep falleth upon men and they're sleeping in their beds, then I speak to them and teach what they're supposed to learn, is the essence of the verse. But it's also in the Epic of Gilgamesh. the gods warn Enkidu through a dream that one of the heroes is going to die for slaying the sacred bull. And then Abraham Lincoln is another example where I don't know if you're familiar or if your listeners are, but 2 weeks before his assassination, he had a dream that he was going to get killed. And the dream is fascinating. He related it in his diary, but it was very plain. I mean, the message was not coded, and it was pretty plain as day. Look, you're going to die if you don't do something. But basically what it was is he was walking through the White House and he heard this sobbing and this weeping, and he said, what's going on? And he finally arrived in, I believe, the East Room, and he saw a catafalque there with his with a coffin, and the soldiers were stationed around in a crowd of people. And he went up to one of the soldiers and he said, who's dead in the White House? And the soldier said, the president. He was killed by an assassin. And then a loud burst of grief awoke him from his dream. I mean, I could just imagine that when he says that, like, oh, I can imagine how freaky that would be. It would definitely make an impression on me. Right. But Lincoln didn't take it as seriously, I guess, as he should have. And it happened a couple weeks later. But it's long been known, and Socrates is another person I quote in the first chapter. He said before his death in the Phaedo, I believe, in Plato's Phaedo, he said to the judges, now men, you've condemned me and I'm to die. He said, but in the hour of death, men are gifted with prophetic power. He said, and I say this to you who are my murderers, a punishment far heavier than you have inflicted on me is surely to befall upon you. And certain sources claim it did. Wow. So it's long been known that certain dreams can predict the future. I think a lot of people have had dreams that have come true. I know I have. So that's one aspect of it. But the reverse speech aspect is a little more scientific and more methodical as far as anybody can replicate this experiment.
Right. No. So what you're saying with the dreams is that there's a divine source. Obviously, the divine source is giving us messages. And to me, I can't help but synchronicity. Synchronicity to me is linked with that. To be, careful, not careful, to be aware of the signs, and I guess the signs in dreams.
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you brought synchronicity up, Carol. What Jung believed is, and this is in some of his collected works like Psychology and Alchemy and Aeon, researches into the phenomenology of stealth. But in these books, he relates that these aren't just symbols. These archetypes are not just pictures. They're actually carriers of energy. And he believed that energy manifested through synchronicity. So these archetypes actually have a conscious energy that is attached to them. It's not just a picture in your unconscious. Right. It does represent certain synchronistic potentialities, I guess, is how you would want to put that. Right. And once that archetype is, quote unquote, according to Jung and David, really activated, once it's brought to the surface, to consciousness, then the synchronistic phenomenon that's associated with that symbol will begin to manifest into your conscious world.
That's and I think as far as the synchronicity and catching the signs, we need to be quiet. I call it, Dr. Bernie Siegel on my show always says, quiet the mind, yes, to pick up on the signs, yes, without any type of insecurity that might pop up.
Yes, in the mystery schools, like with Pythagoras, in his school, he forced a 5-year silence, 5-year rule of silence. And the main reason this was, before his students were initiated into the quote unquote sacred mysteries, was to open a dialogue with their inner self, to stop focusing on everything around you and start turning your attention within yourself to that inner voice and start listening. And that's when illumination and spiritual change, I think, is possible.
Oh, that's terrific. So when we're tapping into the inner voice, we're tapping into synchronicity, we're tapping into, in a way, dreams.
Yes. Yeah. And synchronicity, I know some listeners might not know what that is, and I'll explain it. I think you said at the beginning of the show too, but it's meaningful coincidences. Right. So synchronicity is a big word for things that take place in our life that seem like coincidence, but really aren't. They actually lead us to our greater destiny or to our higher purpose.
So when we ask for a sign, Joshua, relating to synchronicity, and our mind is quiet, then life will give us signs. It might not happen the exact day, but we can certainly ask God, the Creator, to give us signs because we're at a crossroads.
Yes.
Life to
And
know which path to take, which direction to take.
exactly. No, and Carol, that's exactly correct. The thing is a lot of I grew up in a fundamentalist household, and I was taught that Carl Jung was New Age. And a lot of these people that were telling me this never read his writings, and it's obvious because what they're talking about is not what Jung was talking about. If you read his writings,
Right, right.
they're talking about Jung's idea of self as your ego, as you're gratifying yourself, and that's not at all what Jung was talking about. It's the exact opposite of that, actually.
Right.
He's talking about a greater personality. He's talking about I get the best way to put it is a God within you. I mean, some sort of divine, spiritual something there that has your greater destiny as its sole thing to communicate to you. And it's going to do that in certain ways that might not make apparent sense at first. But as you grow in your life, it's going to start making sense. There's a definite order to things, at least at an unconscious level. And once you realize that and start noticing that, life, I think, becomes magical again. I think it takes on that mystique that people are missing. You know what I'm saying?
No question. I mean, nature is in order.
Yes.
Could be certainly on our conscious mind if we just to see how a flower grows, or the
Right.
seasons change or how the planets rotate.
Yep.
So all this, what you're saying, fits into the mystery,
Yes.
of
Of death and rebirth, really.
death and rebirth. And yes, that makes
Right. There we go. Sorry
sense.
about that. Light went off. We're good. I can edit that out.
But no, that's fine.
It's no problem for me.
That's
But yes, death and rebirth.
what you're saying,
You see it in the winter and the summer. People don't really see
right,
what's going
right,
on around them. But with the plants that you're talking about in nature, the answer's right there. I mean, it's not
right,
just a Christian myth.
right,
It's a myth that's older probably than time itself. And it's our story. It's not
right,
something outside of us. It's
right.
our story. But a lot of people don't realize that yet, I guess. It's talking about you. You know what I'm saying? Really, the Christ within. This is everything Paul talked about. The God within. He was a slave to the Christ within, to this inner voice that came to him on the road to Damascus in the form of a corporal vision, and really caused a spiritual transformation. At first, he was blind, but I mean, it eventually transformed this man from a murderer of Christians to somebody who became very spiritual and very concerned with what this inner thing that was happening within him was.
No, that's fascinating. So, what you have, and you certainly have the background in this, Joshua, what's some of the wisdoms that you have learned from this?
Well, from reverse speech or from Jung or from, I mean, Carol, I do a lot of reading. I read a lot of nonfiction. So I've always been interested in Neoplatonism. I've been interested in Jung.
Right.
I've read Nietzsche. I've read a bunch of both philosophy, psychology, and also mysticism. Rudolf Steiner. There are a lot of different writers and thinkers, and I kind of just had this thirst for knowledge from a young age, and I couldn't. It's like when I learned this, I wanted to learn, well, what about this, and this, and so it was just this chain of trying to put all the pieces of history together into something that makes sense to you. Something that you can try and process with your conscious mind that makes sense, because I got sick of people telling me what it was. I would rather go know it for myself. I don't want to listen to somebody else tell me, because I've seen where that gets people. You know what I'm saying? The person telling you probably doesn't know what they're talking about. Odds are, So and I know that from just a lot of the preachers with Jung. I mean, that totally mischaracterization of what Jung was really about. Jung was an empirical scientist. He wasn't an idealist. And he got his theories from the dreams of his patients, but also from his own inner experiences. He was a mystic. He was having visions, and he called this the confrontation with his unconscious. And it happened shortly before World War I, if I'm not mistaken. He saw the rivers of Europe in a vision overflowing with blood, and this caused him to go into a seclusion for a minute and kind of, I guess you would call it a midlife crisis. He kind of broke down for a minute. He thought he was doing a neurosis, as he put it.
Right.
But he actually drew a lot of inspiration from those experiences, and those were the source of the red and the black books as well. So he was, Jung he was so much broader than Freud. Freud
Right.
tried to dogmatize everything around a sexual theory, and I'm not saying Freud doesn't have his place in psychology. He definitely does, especially in early childhood development. I think Freud's psychology is still relevant today in early childhood development. There's a lot of complexes that he theorized that I think probably have some element of truth to them.
Right.
Um, but yeah, Jung was so much broader than that. He believed that the unconscious was not just a retrospective element of our personality, just something that contained wish fulfillments and fantasies and repressed memories, but actually it had a prospective element. It had an element that dealt with the future, with your destiny, or the collective destiny of a whole people's, with like shamans and spiritual leaders. Their great dreams would deal with the collective destiny of an entire nation or an
Right.
entire
Right.
people.
Right.
So just certain things that Jung hit on that I don't think he could have hit on unless he had the experience himself.
Right.
Especially in his Aeon. I mean, he gets down to like the numerical. I didn't realize, because I had a very similar great dream when I was around 14, and I didn't realize it was mandala until I read Jung, and then it took on this whole new dimension. Then it was like, whoa, because I didn't even know what a mandala was, but my unconscious is producing mandala symbols. Now, they're not all going to be the same, but the ground floor plan is, this is what Jung called the a priori archetype, and this was the mandala, the squaring of the circle motif. It'll take on different shapes and different forms depending on the person. It's definitely a unique experience to the individual, but it'll have a floor plan that is the same regardless of the culture. There's a floor plan in our psyches that is pretty much the same for everybody,
Mhm.
and that's pretty fascinating.
Mhm. Definitely. I think the mandala, isn't that a universal symbol?
Yes, yeah, I believe it originated Hindu, Buddhist, but yes, it's a symbol that's been around for a very long time, and it
Right.
represents a microcosmic version of the macrocosmic universe. So it's a miniature universe,
Right.
basically.
Right. Right.
And it's been used in ritual magic and theurgy and for a long time. But I think we call it magic, but I think really what it is it's a form of psychotherapy in a sense that you're manifesting unconscious contents. What it's really doing is it's using unconscious symbols through these rituals, quote unquote, that consciously might not make sense to you, but they speak to you at a very deep level, at a subconscious or an unconscious level,
Right.
because it's speaking in that language. And that's where we get into metaphor restructuring and reverse speech. What David's theories go far beyond just getting messages in reverse. His theories, his psychotherapy that he developed, which is called metaphor restructuring, is probably one of the most revolutionary things for modern psychology today. And what he believed is that you can actually shift the metaphors that people are running in reverse, and in turn change their behavior.
Right. Well, this has been fascinating. We've learned so much from you, Joshua Schmude, so much. And maybe we can all appreciate, value, even have a dream journal, something to connect more to our unconscious mind. And to me, it's it's part of the whole of who we are, the conscious and the unconscious mind. It's not a separation. You know,
No,
it's right, Josh. Yeah,
right,
it certainly is one, and relating to that is to be as much as possible quiet the mind so you listen to the messages, the signs that the Creator and God gives to you to follow your yellow brick road,
right.
which to me is your soul's journey on life,
Yes,
your mission, the gifts that were given to you at birth. We thank you.
right. Yes, and well, and it's funny you say that with the Dream series, Carol. This is what Jung believed. I would highly recommend people keep a journal of their dreams, because Jung believed that unless it was a great dream, it was virtually impossible to determine the meaning unless you had a series of dreams. So if you had 100, 200, 300, 400 consecutive dreams, then the analyst and the patient will begin to see certain recurring motifs. and that the dreams are actually circumambulating or revolving around a center of meaning. And getting deeper and deeper into that center, the more the unconscious, or the more the conscious mind integrates what the unconscious is presenting, basically.
Right.
But this is kind of, it ties into the metaphor structuring as well. But with my book, just to kind of let people know with reverse speech, what I did in my book, when we're talking about using reversals, because we talked about dreams, using reversals is a little different. What you basically do is talk about what you see, what you feel, or what you hear with regard to the future. And you play it backwards. You talk about, even to yourself. I do, the fourth subject is myself in the book, but the thesis of the book is it's four subjects, myself included. I put forth a hypothesis, and the hypothesis basically was when discussing the outcome of future events, using the kinesthetic sensory function, so talking about what you feel, is more likely to generate future tense reversals than using the visual or auditory sensory function. So
Okay.
talking about what you see or what you hear.
Right.
So I designed some questions, there's 14 questions, and asked it to the same four subjects, and did the reversal analysis and documented my findings. So the book isn't about believing what I'm telling you. I don't want listeners to believe me. Test it for yourself. Read the book, test it, and come to your own conclusions. Because
Mm,
ultimately, that's what science is all about.
right. No, thank you so much, Joshua.
Yes.
Thank you very much. On practical side, be aware, try to be aware of the signs that God gives to you, the signs, the symbols, synchronicity, dreams, automatic handwriting, anything that flows from the deeper part of yourself, which is yourself.
Right.
It just has to, I guess, be explored and investigated. Thank you so
Right.
much, everyone, for listening to The Matter of the Heart. And my name is Carol Olivia. I'd say, and be kind to your heart. Listen to your heart. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you. Bye bye.